Hello, this is Angela with Park Rose Permaculture. I am working on remodeling my 1922 cottage in Portland, Oregon. You can see it as a work in progress. I've installed wainscoting, tiled behind our wood stove. There is a soapstone hearth under the wood stove. I've remodeled part of my kitchen and a chunk of the front room. And today I am working on stenciling, and I wanted to share some tips that I have learned in the process of stenciling. So this front room, I have this color called hydrangea blossom over this arch here. And forgive the mess in the living room. I'm in the middle of reupholstering this chair and a bunch of other projects, making curtains. So hi, Hal. So I am stenciling a border in my sunroom using this hydrangea blossom color, which I really like. I actually have this in a book nook in the front of this room as well to tie it all together. So why stencil? So stenciling is a great low-cost alternative for borders when you don't want to put in crown molding or other kinds of molding or picture rail. And I really like the look, and it fits with the character of the house. So here's some tips so far as I'm stenciling. One, use a chalk line to snap a level around your room. Particularly, again, my house is 100 years old. The ceiling is not level. Don't go off the ceiling. Go off true level. After snapping the chalk line, you want to use that as the top edge of your stencil, and when the paint dries, you can just wipe it off easily. So when stenciling, keep in mind that if you use a matte paint, your stencil will bleed less. I am using a satin finish because I am using the same paint I'm using on the walls. And that means my paint is going to be more likely to bleed behind the stencil. That's just the reality of it. Now from a distance, when we're looking at stenciling the border of a room, the imperfections inherent in stenciling and the kind of homey quality to it doesn't show up as much. It looks very nice and uniform from a distance. When you're right up on it, you can see there are issues. But again, pulling back, it's not as noticeable to the eye. And that's just the reality of working with stencils, particularly if you, again, are working with a paint that is a satin or semi-gloss finish. So I want to tape my stencil up, and let me show you the technique that I've been using. So I have my brush down here, and it's really, I found using a regular paintbrush to work less well and to bleed more than using one of these stubbly fat brushes specifically designed for stenciling, and they're just a couple of bucks for 3 different sizes. And a small brush, while it takes a lot longer to cover the area, it's worth it. So you might use a size 6, 8, or 10. I wouldn't go bigger than that. So what you want to do is you want to load your brush up, and stenciling works best if you do what's called dry brushing. So then I want to offload all of my extra paint until my brush looks pretty dry, okay? And that prevents bleeding behind the stencil. So again, load it up here. Oh, look, you can see a wet brush like you would use for painting a wall. You don't want that with stenciling. You want the brush to look really dry, like that, okay? And then I'm gonna come back up to my stencil, and what I've found works best when painting on a vertical surface is to brush in a pattern going up, and you'll notice it's very pale. If you want to go for complete opacity, you're gonna struggle with stenciling. You get less bleeding if you go for getting a less heavy coat of paint on, okay? So you can go straight stippling like this, or you can go for a swirling motion. And you find with a dry brush, you have to reload more often. And you want to get one layer on and then let it dry and decide if you need a second. If you apply a second layer while it is still wet, you will get bleed behind the stencil. If you use colors that are more low contrast, you'll have more success because bleeding will show less. So I have a color called Swiss Coffee on the wall, and then this hydrangea blossom is a pale purpley gray. I'm going to notice bleeding far less than if I had used like a dark blue or a dark green or something more high contrast. So you'll have more success if you use colors that are more tonally close to each other. And then after you have your one coat off, you want to pull your stencil off quickly. And then let me show you what I use if I get any bleeding. So I use a Q-tip dipped in a little bit of ammonia, or you can also use rubbing alcohol. And you can go back and you can touch up any little bleeding behind the stencil while the paint is still tacky, and that'll take it right off if you're really picky about it. So those are some tips that I've learned when stenciling. If you just go with the flow and accept that the process will be imperfect, but it still is beautiful, and from a distance, the finished product looks really, really sharp and nice. It adds character to your home for just a few dollars. Well worth it. Really an enjoyable project. I'm having a great time so far. So I'll come back and show you what this room looks like when it's all the way done. Hope those tips helped you out.